Greetings everyone. Welcome to Narayana S. This is Chaitanya. This is a part of daily news analysis in which we select certain articles from the Indian Express as well as the Hindu and do a detailed discussion on it. The articles that have been selected today are as follows. The first one, Law Panel suggests retaining criminal defamation provision. It is from the Hindu, page number 10. The next one, The Future of Water. It is from the Indian Express, page number 11. The next one, Exposing India's Financial Markets to the Vultures. It is from the Hindu, page number 6. Next one, Cooling off period for retired CEC, CAG and judges. TMC introduces bill in Rajya Sabha. It is from the Indian Express, page number 12. Next one, Centre likely to foot bill for PM rooftop solar scheme. It is from the Hindu, page number 10. In addition to that, we are going to see the prelims and mains practice question at the end. So please stay tuned until the end. Recently, a law panel has recommended that there is a need to retain criminal defamation. That is, we have already criminal defamation in our statute. It said that there is a need to continue the criminal defamation. So in this article, we are going to see what criminal defamation is in the first place and see how it might impact the freedom of speech and expression. Why? Because defamation is caused by an individual who tries to give out expressions or who expresses expressions that ultimately impact the reputation of individual. So one or the other individual in the society might try to promote hatred or might try to reduce the reputation of an individual. In that case, there is a possibility of imposing criminal punishment on the individual. This is the criminal defamation. It ultimately impacts the freedom of speech and expression. Why? Because the society is restricting the individual's freedom of speech. So he is or she is not allowed to express whatever things which she or he might like. Certain times this might ultimately impact the individual as well as societal stability. That is why we try to see that there are restrictions. But there is an issue with regards to how to maintain this balance. That is what we are going to see in this article. And we are also going to examine whether there is a need to see that there is a criminal punishment or whether we should transform it to a civilian punishment, as we have seen in various countries like United Kingdom, even Sri Lanka for that matter, etc. So, the relevance of the topic is you're going to learn about the criminal defamation, at the same time freedom of speech and expression. With regards to syllabus pertaining to UPSC, Mains General Studies Paper 2, important aspects of governance, transparency and accountability. Now, let us look into the previous year questions that has been asked on the freedom of speech and expression. Why? Because we already argued that in the garb of promoting freedom of speech and expression, there is a possibility that you might or one or the other individuals in the society might impact the reputation of the individual or the society or the community, one or the other community. And thus there is a need to have a reasonable restrictions, and thus we try to protect the societal stability, a delicate balance that ultimately leads to peace and stability in the society. Coming to the previous year question, what do you understand by concept freedom of speech and expression? Does it cover hate speech also? Why do the films in India stand on a slightly different plane from other forms of expression discussed? So this is the question that has been asked in the year 2014. Why am I linking with the defamation? We've already seen it. One form of defamation is promoting hatred. Hatred is nothing but we try to, or one or the other forms of expression ultimately impacts the delicate balance with regards to the harmony that exists in the society, where one community is pitted against other community by promoting hatred. So this community, for example, the sentiments are expressed in such a manner that this community hates this community. This ultimately impacts the reputation of this community. Why? Because the views of this community are changed on account of freedom of expression exercised by one or the other individual. This is nothing but a miscreant who is trying to create instability in the society. So that is why it is important to look into this topic. Coming to the context, as we already seen, 22nd Law Commission of India has recently said that there is a necessity to retain it as a criminal offence. Coming to the defamation. What is defamation? Defamation is nothing but a false statement published or spoken deliberately, intentionally, knowingly, with the intention to damage someone's reputation. So here, an individual has an intent to damage one's reputation. He is deliberately trying to damage one's reputation through false information. That is something which is not true, but yet he uttered or she uttered in the public or individually that ultimately damages one's reputation. It is a harmful act. There is a harmful intent behind that act. Thus, those are to be punished as per the criminal defamation cases. And regarding the views of the Supreme Court in Subramanian Swamy versus Union of India in the year 2016 has upheld that the defamation case is important. Why? Because it has the limited restrictions provision. That is, the restrictions being imposed upon the freedom of speech and expressions are limited restrictions. Why? Because as we have already seen that there are certain restrictions on the exercise to see that there is no harmful intent on account of exercise of freedom of speech and expression. That is, the freedom of speech and expression is not unlimited. It is bound by certain restrictions. And thus, it upheld the criminal defamation as per the section 499 of IPC. And we have various laws that regulate the criminal defamation cases. We have Indian Penal Code, under which section 499 and section 500 deals with the criminal defamation. We have Code of Criminal Procedure that deals with the procedure to conduct the cases with regards to criminal defamation. We have Indian Evidence Act that deals with the way in which the evidences are to be collected that ultimately are used for conducting trial and prosecuting. We have Information Technology Act that deals with the online defamation related issues. Why? Because we have seen how the social media is being misused by the society members who are trying to create the hatred in the society or trying to spread misinformation, fake news, etc., ultimately impacting the reputations. Then we have Right to Information Act, under which public can access to government records that deals with the defamation related matters. Coming to the recommendations given by the Law Commission. Law Commission has argued that there is a need to retain it as a criminal offence, as we have already seen, and it has argued that it is derived from Article 21. That is, Article 21 is right to live with dignity. So it talks about right to life, and that too a dignified life. One cannot expect to live with dignity until and unless his or her reputation is protected. Thus, it deals with the right to protection of reputation, that is right to reputation, because reputation is an important element of dignity. So, thus, there is a need for criminal defamation. This is what the law panel has argued. Then, coming to Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023, panel argued that this aligns with Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023, which has also imposed community service punishment upon the individual who is convicted on criminal defamation case. It argued that it provides a delicate balance, upholding the rights of the individual who has been violated on account of some individual or group by defaming. Similarly, it protects from public disturbance. What Law Commission has argued that it is not only pertaining to reputation, it also pertains to seeing that there is no public disturbance in the society. We have already seen how certain individuals try to promote hatred in the society. That is also covered within the criminal defamation case. And thus we see that there is peace and order in the society. Next, it is not aimed at curbing thoughts and ideas is what this panel argued. This recommendation is not to see that there is curbing of freedom of speech and expression. It is nothing but to see that there is reasonable restrictions upon the exercise of freedom of speech. It said that it is a harmonious construction of rights. That is, there is harmony in the society, where right to freedom of speech and expression is protected. At the same time, right to reputation is also protected. Next, the need for criminal defamation. We have already seen that it protects the reputation. It promotes or preserves social harmony. Why? Because there is a chance of promotion of hatred on account of the misuse of the right. Then we have legal courts for victims. Why? Because we have statutes so that the individuals who are violated this right could approach the court and see that they could get recourse from the judiciary, that is help from the judiciary. And thus, they will have confidence or trust upon the legal system in this country. At the same time, it balances freedom of expression with the freedom of reputation. We need to see that there is a delicate balance between both of them. Coming to the challenges. The first challenge is the impediment to the free speech. It is an impediment, nothing but if you have the possibility, if there is a possibility of the punishment that is being imposed on account of one's freedom of speech and expression, it ultimately curbs the individual's freedom of expression. Why? Because he or she might be threatened to utter speech freely on account of the possibility of being punished. And then the potential for misuse. The individuals might simply try to misuse this provision to target the individuals, to target others, or not the other way, despite being a rational argument. For example, if an individual is trying to express his or her ideas that are logical, that actually try to promote information that is valid, in a sense, this information is important for the society. For example, it might be economical, it might be sociological. For example, trying to show that particular caste is backward on account of so and so factors. Yet this might be misused by some or the other individual, and imposing these charges upon that individual ultimately suppresses the possibility of again expressing such views that are important for building trust in the society, that are important for upbringing of various sections of the society. Then we have the possibility of subjectivity. That is, we do not have the exact metric to calculate whether something is good or something is bad on a particular calibration. That is, we cannot say what is good, what is bad, to what extent something is bad. So these are all subjective. It is with regards to the feelings. It is with regards to the point of view rather than being objective. Whether a particular crime punishment is to be criminal or whether it should be civil, whether it is a criminal offense or a civilian offense. So this ultimately has the possibility of being contradictory. Ultimately leads to subjectivity of the judges, whether it is a criminal offense or a civilian offense, or to what extent it has actually caused harm, or whether it has caused harm or not. Then the issue of lengthy legal process. In India, as you know, we have already plenty of cases that are yet to be completed in terms of trial, giving verdict, etc. And these lengthy trials ultimately impacts the individual's quality of life on whom these charges are imposed. Solving these challenges, etc. is difficult. And the trial process itself is a punishment. But because the lengthy processes, coming to the courts again and again, going to the jail, for example. So these processes ultimately impact the freedom of speech and expression. Coming to the burden of proof is ultimately imposed upon the accused. What if the accused is innocent? Yet you are asking the accused to prove his innocence or her innocence. Proving innocence also is a costly affair. You or the other individual on whom the charges are imposed need to hire a lawyer and see that he or she put forward a case to argue that they are innocent in the first place. Then the disproportionate punishment that are imposed due to the criminal defamation. So the punishment might be far higher in terms of jail term, in terms of the monetary punishment, compensation that is to be given. There is something called proportionality in provision of justice. We have to see that there is proportionality in the society. In terms of imposing punishments, you have to impose punishments depending upon the extent of or gravity of the crime committed by the individual. It is argued that it is necessary to transform this into a civilian offense rather than considering it as a criminal offense. The International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights also deals with this freedom of speech and expression. India is party to this statute, international statute, that is international agreements. As per that agreement, India is supposed to uphold freedom of speech and expression. But criminal defamation and other related the regulations on the freedom of speech and expression ultimately have a chilling effect on the freedom of speech. This completes the article. Now, let us look into the next one. The article we are going to discuss is on the future of water. Water, as you know, is one of the scarce commodity as of now. We are going to see why it is scarce, and we are also going to see the implications on the society if we commodify the water. That is, we put a price tag on the water and sell it in the market as a commodity. And also the reasons why we are facing shortages of water in India, the various reasons behind it. Coming to the relevance of the topic, we are going to learn about water commodification and ethical concerns that arise on account of commodifying water. UPSC syllabus point of view, mains, GS paper 4, ethics and integrity. You could also write an essay, as we have seen repeatedly the questions being asked on this topic. And GS paper 3, conservation of water. If you look at the previous year questions that are asked in the year 2018 mains, the ideal solution of depleting groundwater resources in India is water harvesting system. It is asking about the water harvesting system through which we could see that water could be conserved at the same time supply of the water could be maintained throughout. To save water when we have rainfall, because if you look at the case of India, we have sufficient water that is coming through the monsoon. Of course, there is no stability in terms of the way in which we receive rainfall throughout the region as well as different months during which we receive rainfall. But we could create a system through which we could distribute this water to the needs of the society. Similarly, you could expect a question on the conservation of water and the issues pertaining to the distribution and the commodification. Coming to the context, the CME Group in 2020 has launched the world's first water future contract. This is pertaining to the commodification of water. This has raised a public uproar. We have already seen various protests in different countries, in different cities, when a particular private entity has been chosen as a partner to use the water resources and distribute these water resources to that particular population. Huge uproar from the public. Why? Because water is such an important commodity. Not commodity, important resource. It has to be seen as a public resource rather than a way through which private entities could profiteer, could earn profits by selling this water in the market. And thus, concerns were raised by various groups, various reports regarding the complications that might arise by commodifying water. And there is a need to uphold the public good and see that the water is to be dealt as a public resource rather than the private entities indulging in the transactions. And you will see the position taken by India. India adopted a right-based approach. That is, we consider the access to water as a right. Under Article 21, right to life with dignity, you could interpret that water is an important and essential resource, because you cannot expect this right to be upheld without access to water. Water is an important element, as we already discussed. And thus, this fundamental right could be interpreted in such a manner that we are giving access. If you look at various programs put forward by Government of India itself as well as various state governments regarding the ways through which it could provide tapped drinking water, purification of water, as well as conservation of water, as well as sanitation like WASH campaign, Swachh Bharat mission, you could see the importance attached to the water by these governments. And thus, we are trying to see that this service is upheld by this government. In the Narmada Bachao Andolan versus Union of India 2000 case, you could clearly see this line taken by the courts as well, the judiciary, right to access water. It is the duty of the state. If you interpret the directive principles of state policy under Article 39, whatever the resources that India has, it recommends, it gives a directive to the government that the resources are not monopolized and these resources are to be used for the public good, so that there is no monopoly of resource. In this case, we are arguing about the monopoly of the private sector. If this is contracted, the water supply is contracted. Coming to the reasons why we should not consider commodifying of water. Firstly, it is essential for life, as we already see. Added to it, it is not only for the human beings, but also to maintain ecological stability. The ecosystem stability depends upon this water cycle. In addition to maintaining biodiversity, it regulates climate, supports nutrient cycle, etc. In a way, it maintains the ecosystem. It is important for plant growth, animals. It is important for supplying of nutrients to plants. It circulates the nutrients to the river channels. It circulates sediments. It stabilizes the ecosystem. Thus, it has far-reaching impact. If the ecosystem is healthy, in turn, human beings will be healthy. In turn, animals will be healthy. We have a concept called One Health approach, where we see how the life in the planet is interrelated, interdependent, and it is reciprocative. If forests are destroyed, if water supply is destroyed, it ultimately impacts the life of the entire ecosystem. Similarly, the implications of water commodification. Firstly, the economic implications. Ultimately, the market which decides the price of the water. It might be high or it might be low depending upon the scarcity. So this fluctuation ultimately impacts the stability of the life. Like for example, we are seeing the fluctuations in the prices of agricultural commodities. Similarly, the socio-economic implications. That is, the poor might find it difficult to access the drinking of quality water as well. That is why government is bringing up the programs to see that the poor are able to receive tap drinking water. Connections for sanitations. The water supply for sanitation as well, in addition to drinking water. And thus, the poor and vulnerable, especially in the country like India, where we have castes, tribes, etc. And depending upon the segment that they belong to, the marginalization of the community, their ability to earn is structurally linked. That is, people from the lower caste have less access to the way in which we could earn money. And thus, their ability to access drinking water is also constrained on account of making it as a commodified commodity. Next, the environmental consequences. As we already seen, if it is commodified, it will be profit-oriented. That is, private entities will look out for the projects to turn it into a profit rather than to conserve them, to store them, to see that there is stability in terms of water availability. Like for example, water harvesting structures. These are the responsibilities taken by the governments. Of course, certain times even the private sector as well, but generally by the government, as well as the local public, local community, who try to bring out various ways through which it could see that the water is conserved, water is stabilized, supply is stabilized. Whereas private entities are looking for profits. Their aim is profit motive. That ultimately leads to overutilization of the water when there is need. And when there is scarcity, their ability to cater is also dependent upon the profit motive rather than seeing it as a sustainable alternative. And thus, you cannot expect the conservation structures to be built by the private entities. And the global and local governance. It might lead to conflicts between different countries, different states as well, if the private is given the control. Even the private entities try to seek legal recourses so that they could address the disputes that might arise if the government is not upholding the contract. And thus the clash between different entities with regards to maintenance of the water, because we have commodified. Of course, not only because of the commodification of water, this problem might arise, but it might lead to the next level of problems. And the private entities from different countries try to extract more and more water. And that extraction of water will ultimately impact the neighboring countries. For example, if China starts to extract more and more water, it could ultimately impact the water that is flowing through the Brahmaputra. You could expect the conflicts between different countries in the near future if the water scarcity is going to be a sustaining problem. Next, the impact on agriculture. Why? Because if it is commodified, do you think farmers are going to afford the commodified water? The costs are far higher. Already we are seeing the diminishing incomes with regards to the real growth in their income levels. The suicides, etc. This is an added burden to them. If you look at the water scarcity in India, despite India having 18% of the global population levels, the water is just 4% of the global levels. So, obviously, there is scarcity. The reasons for the scarcity is what we are going to deal in this slide. Firstly, the dependence on monsoon and erratic monsoon. The rainfall is not stabilized. Of course, the climate changes, etc., is making it much more vulnerable. It is not that in the past we have seen the stability in monsoon. At least in the past, we could expect the monsoons on the basis of various criteria. But now it is becoming more and more erratic. Suddenly, we see high downpour of rain, which is uncharacteristic of the way in which monsoon rains are generally witnessed. Certain times there is increasing rainfall, certain times decreasing. The downpour is quite high within certain months rather than it being a uniform phenomenon. Similarly, the uneven distribution of rainfall within Indian regions that depends upon the geography, location near the sea, etc. We are not going into the details of the way in which monsoon operates and the climate change impact, cyclones impact, and the calamities like drought. We are seeing drought phenomena, especially in the summer season, and the demographic pressure, that is the population. India is now the most populous country in the world. The demands are quite high. And then the anthropogenic causes for the scarcity is over-extraction of groundwater, especially for agricultural purposes. And also, despite extracting the water, what we are also witnessing is we do not have enough equipments, enough mechanisms to see that the water that is being used for sanitary purpose or other purpose is recycled. The recycling mechanism is not that well developed. If you compare it with the countries like Israel, the recycling rate here is far higher. It is greater than 90%. And the urbanization and industrialization is leading to higher demand of water because our population is still dependent on agriculture for livelihood mostly. That is close to 45% of population. And we are expecting more and more people shifting towards urban areas as well as industrial areas, finding employment in these arenas. The water demand is going to rise, and the pollution in the water bodies on account of agriculture, industrialization, etc. Then inadequate water-related infrastructure. We still didn't build enough reservoirs. Even now, significant amount of water is being wasted. We are simply diverting the water into the oceans. Not diverting, the natural pathway is through the oceans. We are still in process of tapping the entire water resources that we could tap through the rivers that are flowing in India. And the land use changes. That is the way in which our encroachment into the forest is leading to the impact upon the water cycle. As you know, the water cycle also impacts the health of the forest ecosystem. So, it is a necessity for us to conserve the water. This completes the article. Now, let us look into another one. This article is on the internationalization of Indian government bonds. That is, till now, we were selling government bonds to domestic customers as well as recent edition of NRIs as well as overseas citizens of India who could buy government of Indian bonds. That is government bonds, G securities. Now, we are trying to see that we could sell these to international customers as well. Government bonds, as you know, is a way to raise money by Government of India. Of course, the transactions are carried out by Reserve Bank of India on behalf of the Government of India regarding the selling and buying. Okay, sometimes it sells the government securities, sometimes it buys depending upon the needs of the Government of India. We are going to see the issues that might crop up if this is carried out and the possible consequences. That is, at the same time, we are also going to deal with the benefits of selling these bonds in the international market. The relevance of the topic, we are going to learn about local currency government bonds, that is the government securities in this case that we are referring to, and efforts of opening of LCGB to international bond markets and risks involved in selling these bonds internationally to international customers, that is international consumers. Syllabus point of view, you're going to cover GS paper 3, Indian economy and issues relating to mobilization of resources. Because ultimately we are trying to mobilize resources for the government. That is, government is borrowing money indirectly through the instruments of government securities and selling them to the international consumers or customers. Coming to the questions, previous year question that have been asked. Global Financial Stability Report is released by which organization? Why the question has been brought up is similarly the government's measures or the RBI's recommendations pertaining to the global operations that are being carried out or we are planning to carry out. These are important for our examinations. Let us look into the context. The context is JP Morgan and Bloomberg are including the Indian local currency government bonds in their respective global index suits in 2024. So here we are referring to Indian local currency, that is, we are not selling our government securities in the international markets in terms of dollars, but Indian rupees. So we are selling in terms of Indian rupees, that is why we are here referring to local currency government bonds. JP Morgan and Bloomberg are involved in carrying out the transactions of various national bonds, various government bonds. Similarly, they are trying to include Indian-related government bonds as well, the local currency bonds. Now, before going into the deep issues that are involved, let us look into the benefits as well. Firstly, before going into the benefits, let us see the past, how we, in a step-by-step manner, trying to sell our bonds to international customers. In the year 2019, we have started allowing NRIs as well as overseas citizens of Indians to indulge in the transactions of the government bonds. That is, even though they might be resident of United States or resident of any other country, if they are Indians, that is, if they are NRIs or overseas citizens of Indians, they could buy and sell the government securities of Government of India. And this was through the full accessibility route, that is, fully accessible route. That is, they could buy and sell the extent to which they want to. And now, interdepartmental group of RBI is putting in efforts to internationalize the rupee. This is particularly through transactions carried out by Indian LCGBs. Internationalization of rupee is nothing but we are trying to create an environment where rupee could be traded internationally without any hassles. The way in which dollars are traded internationally, you could buy and sell. Any country, any individual from any country is allowed to buy and sell dollars. That is why it has much value in the market, as well as it shows the strength of the dollar. Similarly, if we promote internationalization of rupee, that ultimately leads to opening of Indian economy to the global economy, and everyone, that is, various countries have or will have the permission to indulge in transactions of rupees, rather than the restrictions that we are imposing as of now. Of course, we are not completely open as of now, but we are trying to be more and more liberal so that more and more people could invest in our country, could give loans to our country, both to government as well as both to the private entities. Of course, there are various issues attached to internationalization of rupee. We are not going to see them in detail, but you will be able to understand certain issues by understanding this article. Because one of the important ways through which we could internationalize rupee is selling the Indian LCGBs in the global indices. Now let us look into the merits which we could witness if we promote this internationalization of LCGBs. The first one is there will be reduced dependence on domestic institutions. Till now what we have seen is Government of India sells its bonds. Of course, it is the RBI which sells the bonds on behalf of the Government of India within the domestic market. So it is the private customers or the government customers, like for example, the public sector banks, private sector banks, even citizens of India. For that matter, we have seen the NRIs, OCIs, etc. They could buy and sell. So we are trying to mobilize the resource mostly through the domestic market. The government is raising finances or borrowing the money mostly from the domestic resources. Now, by internationalization, we could also borrow the money from international market, right? Because international customers will be buying the bonds. So instead of having excessive reliance on domestic customers, we could also sell these bonds at the international level. Thus, we are going to raise resources from the international customers. Coming to the facilities that it provides with regards to current account and fiscal deficits. So, the current account transaction is nothing but the international transactions carried out by India. Might be buying or selling of goods, buying or selling of services, etc. So, these are generally done in terms of dollars. If we raise money internationally, it is nothing but we are raising money in terms of dollars. Those dollars could be used for meeting our current account deficit. That is, we have more dollars through the international customers and we could use it for carrying out this current account transaction, that is buying and selling of goods from the international customers. Then it will lower domestic interest rates. Why? Because as we already seen, now we could sell the bonds to the international customers. If we sell more bonds to the international customers, more and more money will be free in the domestic market. These could be used with private entities. Thus, if there is more capital, more money in the market, obviously the interest rates will fall because government's reliance on the domestic market has reduced. Next comes, it relieves the balance sheets of the local financial institutions. So, even the local financial institutions, their balance sheet will be in a better position rather than completely trying to depend on the government securities for showing their balance sheets. Next comes the exchange rate risks associated with the selling of the bonds. That is, if the rupee value appreciates or depreciates, the risk ultimately passes through the international customers rather than Government of India. Why? Because we are selling these government bonds in terms of rupees rather than in terms of dollars. As you know, we see the depreciation of rupee happening now and then in the market. Similarly, you could expect this depreciation or the appreciation of rupee ultimately impacting the international customers rather than us. The risk associated with depreciation of the rupee falls upon the international customers rather than we bearing the burden. But there are risks as well. Firstly, exchange rate risks need to be compensated. So earlier we were debating that the risk is ultimately borne by the international customers. But one of the major demands raised by the international institutions which are involved in transactions are the exchange rate risks are to be compensated by the government itself. If there is a depreciation, we are going to take the loss because we have to compensate it through dollars. We have to spend more rupees to buy the same amount of dollars to repay the money. So they are asking for compensation on account of the risks associated with transacting rupees. Rupee value seems to, or if there is a general trend that rupee value depreciates year after year. If you see the graphs, you will be able to see, you will be able to understand the difference. Coming to the need of local currency bonds to offer higher returns. Why? Because the possible risks associated with indulging in rupees requires providing the bonds at higher interest rates. Thus, the international customers will be encouraged only if they get higher returns rather than lower returns. And this ultimately increases the costs, right? Costs. Why? Because the interest is ultimately paid by the Government of India. And the loss of autonomy. That is, if there is supply and demand of the government securities within the domestic market, RBI has got the authority. RBI has got the tools, the regulatory mechanisms through which it could control the prices of the bonds, control the price of the interest rates, etc. But now you have left this to the international customers. Thus, the market will decide rather than the institutions. Many times we see the international market being manipulated by big investors. It might be banks, it might be insurance companies, mutual fund institutions, etc. Now you are leaving it to the international arena. And thus, our control over the pricing of the government bonds will get hit. Our control over the way in which we could reduce the fluctuations in interest rates will be hit, etc. Ultimately, the way to regulate the economy is going to take a hit. Then comes the domestic bond markets too can get crippled on account of the vulnerabilities in the international market. Right? If there is vulnerability in the international market, that will ultimately impact the domestic market. Why? Because we cannot completely control the way in which transactions are carried out. Thus, the risks are also quite higher. coming to the cogent, there is a need for us to see that our exchange rate is stable and boom bust cycles in capital flows are maintained properly. That is, the higher growth rates followed by recession that we generally witness as a growth cycle. We could control it only if we have stronger fundamentals, macroeconomic credentials. If our transactions are carried out at higher level, the international level, we could expect that we could somehow cope up with the vulnerabilities at the global level, like the US does. US has got the higher GDP numbers, per capita income, forex reserves. It need not maintain forex reserves because it has its currency itself is used as an intermediary for carrying out international transactions. India doesn't have that luxury, and India doesn't have enough forex resources, that is enough dollars to take care of the vulnerabilities that we witness in the international market. So in this way, there is a need to increase the fundamentals, macroeconomic credentials, and then go for steps to internationalize. This is about the article. Now let us look into another article. Recently, a bill was brought in the Rajya Sabha that deals with the cooling off period. In this article, we are going to learn what cooling off period is and why it is important. And it deals with the appointment done by central government to various important constitutional as well as legal posts. For example, Chairman of Election Commission of India. These are done by central government. Central government has say with regards to appointments, and that too, it could decide because it has such jurisdictions. Of course, there are various appointment procedures. We are not going to deal with the specifics of appointment procedures. What we are saying here is central government has a major say with regards to appointments of various key posts. And there's a need to regulate the way in which it is being done, right? Because it ultimately impacts the way in which governance is being done in this country. If there is lacking of independence of institutions, it might ultimately impact the governance quality. For example, the targeting of opposition or the excessive influence that the government has upon these officials ultimately impacts the quality of the institutions. For example, CBI. If government appoints someone who has inclinations towards the interests of the central government, that is, he or she might be interested in promoting the interest of the government rather than interest of the society for which it is promoted in the first place. That is, CBI, etc., are the institutions that are created for pursuing certain principles. Here, for example, objective investigation is one of the expected standard. And if the government has major say with regards to how it operates, it ultimately impacts the quality of the investigation procedure. We want to see that the government is also held to account for the mistakes that it is committing. It is necessary that there is independence in which the CBI operates. Thus, we have to see that the appointments that are done in these institutions are done on the basis of objective criteria rather than the interests of the central government. Of course, we have to keep in mind the interests of the central government as well, but at the same time, it has to be balanced with the interest of the society at large as well. So in this way, it is important to see that we regulate the way in which the appointment of the posts is done. Relevant to the topic, you are going to learn about offices of CEC, CAG, judges of Supreme Court, RAW, IB, and ED. We are not going to go into the details of these offices, but we need to see why there is a need for cooling off period. Coming to the UPSC syllabus point of view, prelims, Indian polity and governance, mains, appointment to various constitutional posts, power, functions, and responsibility, statutory, regulatory, and various constitutional judicial bodies. So this is what we are going to deal in this topic. Coming to the previous year questions that are asked on the topic that we are discussing now, mains, discuss the role of Election Commission of India in the light of the evolution of Model Code of Conduct. Similarly, you could expect questions on CAG, ED, etc., which are various important institutions. Prelims, consider the following statements. The Election Commission of India is a 5-member body. Similarly, various statements with regards to Ministry of Home Affairs in dealing with elections, by-elections, etc. So, learning about the institutions, the way in which the members are appointed to various key positions, are important to deal with not only prelims question but also mains question. So, what is the bill about? The bill is brought by opposition, and the name of the bill is Public Services Integrity Bill 2023. As the name itself suggests, it tries to uphold integrity with regards to way in which the public posts are filled, that is, appointment or recruitment to these important posts. We already seen that the central government has major say with regards to appointment of various posts in the important institutions, and it was recently introduced in the Rajya Sabha. So we are going to firstly deal with what this Public Service Integrity Bill has said or has various provisions with regards to dealing with the appointment procedures, and we are also going to see what cooling off period is in the first place. Firstly, the bill seeks to bring in mandatory 3-year cooling off period. Now you come to know what cooling off period is. The 3 years gap that an individual is to take while accepting other official positions. For example, there are two institutions, X and Y, and the term in the X office has been completed. Now, before occupying the office Y, this individual is supposed to take 3-year cooling off period. That is, he or she shall not accept any appointment. That is the rule as per the procedures put forward by this particular bill. Why it is important? It is to ensure that there is integrity. Integrity means upholding highest moral principles. Like, for example, you cannot expect the country to be thriving when the institutions are completely in the control of the government, as we already argued. To see that the individual is working as per the principles enshrined in the constitutions, enshrined in various legislations, and thus he brings or she brings the highest moral acceptable principles, being autonomous, being not fearful of the possibility of the retributions from the government. So in this way, we could see that the institutions are working for the benefit of the society, and thus it realizes the visions envisioned by our constitutional makers as well as the societal interests. Thus, there is a possibility that we could reduce the possibility of conflict of interest by mandatorily recommending or mandatorily imposing 3-year cooling off period with regards to appointment of constitutional or legal posts or various institutions, and thus reduce the possibility of higher influence from the government, ultimately impacting the functioning of these institutions. And it specifies with regards to key positions like Chief Election Commission, Supreme Court judges, heads of the premier investigative and intelligence agencies like RAW, IB, ED, etc. There are various accusations with regards to the way in which ED is functioning, targeting the opposition. Similarly, if there is no transparency with regards to the way in which judges are appointed, or how the heads of the RAW are appointed or IB are appointed, it ultimately impacts the quality of the governance in the society, the quality of law and order in the society as well, the quality of justice in the society, as it tries to prevent the conflict of interests. So, how this bill tries to promote the system of cooling off period? Firstly, it said that stringent measures are to be taken if this principle is violated or this rule is violated. For example, up to 10 lakh fine and the immediate vacating of office once this rule is violated. We have seen how it could be violated. Suddenly, for example, we are providing an official position to an official after he has completed or she has completed one particular office. But there are exceptions in the bill as well. That is, certain times there might lead to an urgent necessity for the government to fill a particular official position, or government lacks the candidates who could actually fill that official position. In that case, we need expertise, and we cannot strictly abide by the law of cooling off period for 3 years. Then at that point of time, there is a need to provide exceptions. And thus, it has an exception as well by considering the need of the society, by considering the need of way in which the administration could be run efficiently. But this exception is to be conducted in such a manner that this shall not be misused by the central government. So it has put forward a special review and exemption committee which will look into the merit of the case and then allow appointments despite it not falling within the precincts of 3-year cooling off period. In that case, it has argued that the cooling off period is to be reduced to 1 year rather than 3 years. This is about the cooling off period. How it is important, it will uphold transparency and integrity. Why? Because we will be able to know clearly how the appointment is carried out and how we have cooling off period that ultimately is beneficial to the functioning of various institutions in the country. And it upholds integrity, that is highest moral principles, because we are going to reduce the influence or say of the central government with regards to functioning of the institutions. Then it ultimately promotes highest standards, as we have already argued. We have various key official positions which are occupied by various officials, and central government has a major say. We are not going to go into the details of how or the procedure that is followed with regards to appointments. We have key institutions like CEC, that is Chief Election Commission post. The institution pertaining to is Election Commission of India. Then we have Supreme Court judges, CAG, and the heads of RAW, IB, and ED. Look at the eligibility criteria. Central government has a major say with regards to appointments. Even if you look at the Supreme Court judges, High Court judges are promoted to Supreme Court judges. We have a collegium system that regulates or that provides a procedure with regards to how appointment is to be done. And it is not only with regards to promoting the High Court judges, it could also select distinguished juries. But yet, ultimately, the presidential assent is required. Presidential assent in this case refers to the central government giving a go-ahead to the appointment. Many times you have seen how it delayed the appointments on one or the other criteria. These are various eligibility for other posts after retirement. So in this way, there is a need to see that we could regulate the way in which the recruitment is carried out by the central government. This completes the article. Now let us look into another one. Government of India has brought in a scheme to encourage solar power generation in our country. This particular article deals with it. So the relevance of the topic, you are going to learn about Pradhan Mantri Suryodaya Yojana, rooftop solar system. With regards to syllabus, GS Paper 2, Government Policies and Interventions for Development in Various Sectors. GS Paper 3, Conservation, Environment, Pollution and Degradation. Why? Because this measure ultimately conserves the nature. Instead of relying on the fossil fuels for generation of electricity, we are trying to shift towards solar power generation. That too by involving 1 crore population in this country. 1 crore families, because we are trying to install 1 crore solar power projects. The minor project. It is not the major project that we usually see in the news. It is generation of electricity by the family through the usage of solar power panels. Previous year question related to this topic. With reference to solar water pumps, consider the following statements. First one, solar power can be used for running surface pumps and not for submersible pumps. So similarly, the questions of this type could be asked in the examination. Also the question on the schemes, because these are important. Coming to the context, Government of India is trying to promote household rooftop solar system. The projects that I am referring to is this. And this is through the scheme Pradhan Mantri Suryodaya Yojana. This is the name of the scheme. Under this scheme, the households which consumes less than 300 units, the Government of India is going to install the solar panels for production of electricity. Coming to the scheme, it is a rooftop solar system for residential consumers. It provides a source through which the households could be self-reliant with regards to energy generation. In addition to generation of energy, what we are trying to do is to commoditize them. Whatever the excess power that is produced after the consumption of the family, it could be sold by that family. Thus, in this way, this is monetized and the families, in addition to producing electricity for consumption purpose, they could earn money as well. So as we already seen, this is for the families which consume less than 300 units of electricity, and the central public sector undertakings are given the responsibility for installation and maintenance of the solar power panels. The target is 1 crore families, as we already seen, and the estimated cost is rupees 1 lakh crore, which have been allocated in the budget. The PSUs like NTPC will identify the households depending upon the consumption patterns of those households. As we already seen, 300 units is set the bar. 60% of the installation cost will be subsidized by the center. That is, center will bear 60% of the installation cost. This you have to remember. Why? Because we have details that are asked in the examination. Then comes the householder, who are going to pay nothing. As we already seen, it is completely free of cost. Center is going to bear the burden. And the repayment from the excess electricity usage is given to the households as well. So they will earn the money in the process of selling as well. Then comes the center will bear the entire cost of setting up for less than 300. But beyond the 300 units as well, there is a provision where 40% through the loan or self-financing, the consumers could indulge in setting up the panels. But this is the consumer who is consuming greater than 300 units of electricity. So these are the details about the scheme. Any further details will be updated as we go along. So this completes the articles. Now let us look into the practice questions. Coming to the first practice question. Consider the following statements regarding the Public Service Integrity Bill 2023. We have seen this regarding the cooling off period. The bill mandates a 3-year cooling off period for individuals retiring from positions like CEC, Supreme Court judges, and heads of RA, IB, and ED. This is true. Exemptions to the cooling off period may be granted by a special review and exemption committee for individuals with unique skills crucial for certain governmental rules. We have seen this as well. This too is true. The bill stipulates a penalty for those violating its provisions, but does not provide a process for review or appeal of the penalties imposed. This is false. As you know, whatever the grievances that any individual is facing, the government in the statutes provides a way through which they could resolve it. You cannot expect a bill to bring in regulations and not expect the possibility that there might be the grievances that might arise and resolving them. So even through the use of the common sense, we'll be able to eliminate this option. So which of the following statements is or are correct? The answer is A, 1 and 2. Next is, with reference to the water on planet Earth, consider the following statements. The amount of subsurface fresh water is more than the amount of surface fresh water. So this is talking about the fresh water. This is a true statement. Intuitively, it might feel that this is false, but this is actual fact. So groundwater is, that is ground level fresh water is far higher when compared to the surface fresh water. More than 50% of the freshwater resources are in the form of glaciers and ice caps. This too is true. This too you have to remember it. This is a fact. These facts are asked in the preliminary examinations as well. So, which of the above given statements is or are correct? The answer is both 1 and 2, C. Next one. Consider the following statements regarding solar schemes and status of solar power in India. First one. PM Kusum launched in order to generate solar power in urban areas. This is false. The full form of it is PM Kisan Urja Seva Uthan Abhiyan. Under it is the rural areas in which the farmers are made partners for promotion of generation of electricity. So this is false. Next, Atal Jyoti Yojana launched to illuminate dark regions through establishment of solar street lights. This is true. The Pradhan Mantri Suryodaya Yojana launched to promote household rooftop solar system adoption. This is true, as we already seen. How many of the above statements are incorrect? The answer is A, 1 and only. Next one. With respect to the defamation in India, consider the following statements. In India, defamation is both civil and criminal offense. This is true, where, as we have seen, the issue is making it as a criminal offense. Next one. Article 21 of the Constitution encompassing the right to reputation addresses defamation as an offense. This is true, as right to reputation is an integral part of right to live with dignity. Third one, the defamation law imposes restrictions on the right to freedom of speech. This is true. This is the argument that we have put forward and we have seen the points in favor of this argument. So which of the above statement is or are correct? The answer is D, all the above. Next one, the fifth one, the expression fully accessible route, which was recently in news, refers to the opening up of specified government bonds without any restrictions to the investment by NRIs. This is true, as we have already seen in the article that we have dealt. According to RBI, one of the measures to internationalize Indian rupee is by integrating Indian local currency government bonds into global indices. This too is true. Which of the above statement is or are incorrect? The answer is both are incorrect, right? So, the answer is D, none of the above are incorrect. Mains. Despite possessing abundant freshwater resources, India grapples with water scarcity. Critically analyze the reasons behind the paradox. This is the mains question. Now let us look into the model answer. We already dealt in detail the reasons why there is scarcity in freshwater resources. Despite having abundant freshwater resources, when compared to the global levels, the freshwater resources are quite lower. But if you look at the overall scenario within our country, having multiple rivers, the rainfall, as well as the groundwater, we have limitations with regards to the ability to supply this water to the population. This is one of the reasons why we are facing water-related crisis situations. Now, firstly, start by justifying the abundance of freshwater resources like number of rivers, perennial nature of rivers, etc. In the body, write down the reasons for the worries. The causes for the scarcity. We have seen two causes, the geographical reasons and anthropogenic reasons in detail. Geographical regions like the rainfall pattern in our country, the climate change related issues, etc. Anthropogenic reasons, the urbanization, the agriculture, industrialization, etc. These are the causes, the major causes. In the conclusion, emphasize the need for a multifaceted approach so that we could tackle both these challenges, adapting to the geographical reasons why we are facing scarcity, as well as measures that we need to address the anthropogenic reasons, so reduce them and try to find nature-based solutions so that we could uphold One Health approach. So this is about the question and answer. This completes the session. Please do like, share and subscribe our channel. Thank you.